It was a warm summer night, and the stage was set for one of the most anticipated performances of the year. The stadium was packed, the arena lights shining brightly and the energy of the crowd soaring. Amidst applause and screams of excitement, no one could have predicted what was about to happen. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation, not only because of the show, but also because of the presence of a person who, for years, had won hearts with her elegance and charisma, Princess Diana. She was about to do something no one could have ever imagined. In the dressing room, Diana was preparing for her grand entrance. Her hair was carefully arranged, and her dress, a deep shade of blue, shimmered softly under the lights. She was no longer just the Princess of Wales, but a figure who transcended titles and responsibilities. She was there to make history, to surprise, to give her audience something they would never forget. This would be no ordinary night. Meanwhile, the crowd couldn't wait to see their icon, the woman who made headlines every day, being acclaimed for her humanitarian work and her role as a mother. Little did they know that Diana was about to transform the event into something much more personal, something that would touch everyone in a unique way. As she stepped onto the stage, Diana not only commanded the space with her majestic presence, but something else was happening behind her charming smile. She was nervous, but this nervousness was different. It was a kind of excitement that stemmed from something more intimate. She wanted to give her audience not just what they expected, but something deeper, something unexpected. The setting was perfect for what was to come. The stage was illuminated. By brilliant lights, the orchestra was ready to accompany the performance, and the audience was ecstatic. But Diana, looking out at the audience, knew she was about to do something that would make that moment unforgettable. She was there not just as a princess, but as a woman, a mother, a real person, wanting to share a piece of herself with those who admired her. "I want tonight to be something we all remember," she said into a microphone, her voice soft but full of emotion. The audience fell silent, waiting for her to continue. The surprise was about to be revealed, and no one knew what would come next. The crowd was utterly silent, eagerly awaiting what Princess Diana would say next. She looked around, absorbing the energy of the audience, and felt the weight of every gaze focused on her. She knew this moment wasn't just another performance, but a unique opportunity to create a real connection with those who admired her. Her heart pounded, not from nervousness, but from a pure emotion she couldn't hide. "I wanted to do something special for you tonight," she began, her voice as soft as the breeze. Something that meant more than conventional words or gestures. Something personal, something that truly touched the hearts of everyone here. The intrigued audience gathered even closer, as if eagerly awaiting more words. What was she planning? What could be so significant as to make this evening unique? Diana paused, letting the suspense linger in the air. She knew her surprise would change everything, but the truth is, she wasn't just surprising her audience. She was also, unknowingly, creating a new chapter in her own life. "I'm here tonight, not just to sing, but to offer something deeper, more real," she continued, with a sincerity that drew everyone in the room closer. "Today, I'm going to fulfill a fan's dream. A fan who for years sent me letters, kind words, and who asked me for something very special. I want everyone to know that even with all my public life, you have a special place in my heart." A murmur began to grow in the audience. A fan? What did she mean? Diana looked back, and soon a young woman was called to the stage. She was visibly moved, her eyes shining with a mixture of disbelief and happiness. It was hard to believe she was about to experience something so extraordinary, something that could only happen in a fairy tale. The audience was on edge, watching Diana and the fans' every move. What was to come next seemed impossible, but it was real. When the young fan took the stage, her hands were shaking. She could hardly believe she was there, in front of her idol, the woman who had been her beacon of strength, elegance, and courage for so many years. Diana smiled gently, taking her hand with a lightness only she could muster. It was a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. "I want you to know that your words have always been a comfort to me," Diana said with a look of understanding. The speechless fans stared at her as if she were living a dream. How was this happening? She, a simple fan, was standing before her heroine, receiving her attention and affection on a packed stage. What could be more extraordinary? The young woman was too emotional to speak. She simply shook her head, unable to hold back the tears that began to well up in her eyes. The audience, touched by that moment of pure humanity, was also moved. Diana, with her usual grace, didn't hesitate. She pulled the young woman into a tight hug, showing that, despite all her fame, she never forgot the importance of each person in her life. What seemed like a simple gesture of affection turned into something much greater. The young woman not only received Diana's attention, but also a symbolic gift. Diana presented her with a medal, a unique piece of jewelry that represented a symbol of love and gratitude. This young woman, who had faced challenges in her life, now had something to cherish, something to remind her of her strength and courage. Diana's gesture was much more than a simple surprise. It was a representation of the unconditional love she felt for her fans. Upon presenting it, Diana said, "This medal symbolizes the strength we all have within us. I hope it always reminds you that you are never alone. No matter what happens, you always have the power to fight." The audience was ecstatic. The lights shine, but the true light of that night was the sparkle in people's eyes. The energy that coursed through the stadium that night was something no one could have predicted. Diana's simple yet profoundly impactful gesture had touched the souls of everyone there. It wasn't just about being a star or a princess, it was about being human. The young woman now holding the medal was in tears. She looked at Diana, who was still standing beside her, and said, her voice trembling, "I never imagined this could happen. I always dreamed of meeting you, but I never thought you would see me." Diana smiled and said, "You're more than a fan. You're part of my story, our story. And everyone here has the power to touch the world in their own unique way. Never underestimate what you're capable of." The audience was silent, but Diana's every word was absorbed like a mantra. It was as if, that night, everyone had been reminded of their own inner strength. The princess, with her generosity, had lit a flame of hope and love in the hearts of everyone there. People began to applaud in unison, but it wasn't just any applause. It was an applause of recognition, of gratitude, of empathy. Everyone, regardless of who they were, was united by that night of pure emotion. Diana had not only given an incredible surprise to a fan, but also to every single person present in that stadium. She had shown that true power lies in our simplest and most sincere gestures. After meeting the fan, Diana remained on stage, looking out at the audience. The music began to play again, but this time with a new energy. It was as if the show had transformed into something deeper, more reflective. Diana, with her magnetic presence, seemed to understand that she was about to create something that would transcend the boundaries of entertainment. "I hope everyone here today remembers one thing," she said, her voice soft but full of impact. "What I did here, this surprise, is not something I do because I'm a princess or a celebrity. I do it because I believe that all of us, at some point, can touch someone's life in a special way. Never underestimate the power of your actions." The audience was immersed in silence, absorbing every word. This was no longer about a simple encounter with a fan. It was about what that night represented. Diana wasn't just making a gesture of kindness, but teaching something much greater. She was sharing her vision that we are all capable of making a difference, regardless of where we come from or who we are. As the night continued, the intensity of what had just happened on stage began to sink in. Diana knew this gesture wasn't just for her or the fan, but for everyone there. She was unwittingly sharing with them a much larger vision of what it meant to be truly human, compassionate, and generous. The surprise she had given her fan wasn't just a material gift, but a life lesson. Diana, who had always been seen as a symbol of grace and elegance, was now breaking down even deeper barriers. She became not just a public figure, but a true inspiration for humanity. She went beyond titles and royalty to touch people's souls directly and genuinely. Her gesture touched something fundamental in people: the need for real connection, to see the other as a human being, not as a distant or untouchable icon. As Diana stepped off the stage after greeting her fan and presenting the medal, she began to feel an internal transformation. It wasn't just the audience who were touched by her surprise, but also herself. She realized that, as much as she was known worldwide for her good deeds and dedication to others, she had never experienced anything as genuine and immersive as that moment. It was as if, by doing good in such a pure way, she was also healing and reconnecting with herself. Being a public figure can be lonely at times. The expectations and responsibilities of being in the spotlight can be overwhelming. But in that moment, Diana felt more connected to people than ever before. She realized her mission was actually much simpler and more meaningful than she'd imagined: to be present and real with others, to share her vulnerability and strength in a genuine way. After that magical night on stage, Diana didn't yet know the impact her actions would have outside of that environment. As television cameras and photographers captured the event, news began to spread quickly, but the true essence of what had happened lay in something much deeper. The media focused on the moment Diana presented the medal and delivered her speech. However, the words spoken that night weren't captured by the camera lens. They were in the hearts of the people present, in the silence that followed those powerful words. The real connection was something the media could never fully grasp. Diana had done something unprecedented. She took the focus off herself and placed it on the audience. She was no longer trying to be a distant, untouchable figure. Instead, she was showing that true greatness comes from simplicity and generosity of heart. Contrary to what many might imagine, she wasn't there to be the star of the night. She wanted people to understand that everyone has the power to do good and touch someone's life. By allowing her fan to be with her on stage, Diana did something more profound than many would have realized until then. She gave that fan the chance to feel seen, heard, and valued, something few experience in their lifetime. The surprise, ultimately, wasn't just Diana's presence, but what she did to change the perspective of those watching. The real surprise was how she transformed the evening, going beyond the expectations of a simple event to create a transformative experience. The night ended, but the reverberations of Diana's surprise continued to resonate. In the weeks that followed, the story of that gesture spread around the world. Fans began sharing their own stories of how Diana's gesture had touched their lives. Messages of gratitude and inspiration began to pour in on social media. People from all over the world were touched by Diana's humility and the way she connected with her fan so genuinely. Newspapers, TV stations, and news websites were filled with accounts of the night. But what began as a simple surprise for a fan became a movement. Thousands of people began sharing their own stories of how small actions can have big impacts. Social media was flooded with posts using the hashtag #UDianaSurprise, which quickly went viral. People were talking about how Diana's gesture, the impact was global. Diana's message quickly spread around the world, and people from different cultures and countries began talking about the importance of simple acts of kindness. In Japan, the United States, Latin America, and Europe, Diana's story was shared, inspiring generations to be more empathetic and recognize the power of a kind gesture. For Diana, the night was a turning point. She had surrendered herself to something deeper than the cameras, flashes, and compliments could capture. She knew the event had been special, but more than that, she felt connected to her own essence. The experience of giving something so personal to a fan made her reflect on her own life, her own choices, and her journey. She spent the following days immersed in a whirlwind of emotions, but also in a period of introspection. Diana knew that simple gesture had touched many lives, but what she didn't expect was the personal impact it would have on her. For the first time in a long time, she felt she was living her truth genuinely, without the masks she was so often forced to wear. By placing herself in a vulnerable position, she felt stronger than ever. Diana understood that what she had done was not just a simple action. She had shown herself in a way few could understand, with empathy, with heart, with courage. And most importantly, she had done something no one else could have done for her. By touching her fans' life, she had touched her own. Diana's event and gesture were not just an isolated chapter in her career, but a legacy she built. The message she conveyed that night resonated long afterward, transcending the boundaries of what a common gesture could achieve. Diana not only showed that fame and power shouldn't push people away, but on the contrary, should be used to bring them closer. Today, many people remember Diana not just as a princess or global icon, but as a woman who made her life a platform for change. She taught us that no matter how high you reach, there's always a way to connect with others in a deep and meaningful way. True greatness comes from how we treat others, not from our position. Diana's legacy lies not only in the photographs, memories, or speeches she made, but in the simple gestures, the moments of generosity and empathy she provided. And somehow, her story continues to inspire, teach, and make the world a better place, reminding us that with a simple act of kindness, we can change lives forever.